It is good to see everybody on this beautiful Valentine's Day. Since it's Valentine's Day, a lot of people are thinking about relationships, thinking about love and giving gifts and flowers and cards and candy. And so as I was preparing this year's sermon schedule, I thought this would be a great time to start talking about God's wisdom about relationships, because we're all thinking about it already. So for the next few weeks, I think 5 weeks in total, we're going to be talking about God's wisdom concerning all sorts of different aspects of relationships. But one of the funny things about Valentine's Day and relationships in general is when we say relationship, we often think romantic relationship. But interestingly enough, romantic relationships take up a very small percentage of our total relationships. I mean, I have relationships with all of y'all, but I only have a romantic relationship with one person. That is Keely, who I'm married to. Hi. But we do have relationships with many other people. So today we're going to be talking about friends and acquaintances. Specifically, who is influencing whom? Because let's face it, when we have a relationship with somebody, there is influence going back and forth. Now, just in case anybody is thinking, well, this is a kid's sermon for young people, so I can tune out, that's not the case. All of us have people that we interact with. And while, yes, generally when we talk about what influence do your friends have on you, we're talking to kids or teenagers. All of us who have friends have people who have influence over us and people who we influence. So we need to talk about which direction that influence is going. So first, today we're going to talk about why is this a big deal? We're going to ask the question, why is this a big deal? We're then going to talk about separating the friends from the acquaintances. And finally, we're going to talk about how a true friend should act. And by the end of this, what we're going to see is that we need to make sure that we are having a good influence on others while not letting them have a bad influence on us. And that if somebody is having a bad influence on us, we need to spend less time letting them have that influence. So, let's jump in and ask, why is this a big deal? I was asked this question by a somewhat surly teenager a number of years ago when we were talking about some friends that were having a bad influence. And this teenager asked me, what does it matter who my friends are? Why is it such a big deal if I hang out with these people? And you know, that's a really, really good question. Let's talk about that. Let's go to 1 Corinthians 15:33. 1 Corinthians 15:33, a small verse, but a very important one, says, do not be deceived. Bad company corrupts good morals. Now, this exists within a larger framework of the context, but just this verse gives us a really insightful view into relationships. Bad company corrupts good morals. You see, the people we spend time with will impact our morals. Now, if we're spending time with people who have good moral standards, who are influencing us for righteousness, that's great. But if we're spending time with people who have low moral character, who are bad influences, that will impact our morals. And we may be thinking, well, I'm an adult, I'm mature, I know what's going on. But it impacts you in maybe even subtle ways. When you spend lots and lots of time with somebody who is trying to influence you towards sin, who is a bad character, human nature is to try to conform to those that we spend lots of time with. We're, for lack of better term, pack animals. We want to be with people. We conform to the group that we're in. And if we spend time with people who are a bad influence, even subconsciously we start to conform to them. But the opposite is also true. Let's go to 2 Timothy 2:22 through 26. 2 Timothy 2:22 through 26. And we read starting in verse 22, now flee from youthful lusts and pursue righteousness, faith, love, and peace with those who call on the Lord from a pure heart. but refuse foolish and ignorant speculations, knowing that they produce quarrels. The Lord's bondservant must not be quarrelsome, but be kind to all, able to teach, patient when wronged. So we have this list of the way that God's bondservants should act, God's people should act. And notice what it says then in 25. With gentleness correcting those who are in opposition, if perhaps God may grant them repentance, leading to the knowledge of the truth. So not only can others have influence on us, we can have influence on others. Our good behavior, our willingness to correct with gentleness can have a good impact on them. And they may come to their senses and escape the snare of the devil, having been held captive by him to do his will. You see, our morals impact the people we spend time with. And so we have this mutual relationship where people impact us and we impact them. We can impact them for good, but then they can also impact us for evil. And of course, the opposite's true. They can impact us for good if we're hanging out with righteous people. So this is then where we need to talk about separating the friends from the acquaintances. Because we know that this back and forth relationship exists. Well, what do we do with that then? It's great to have the info. What do we do about it? Well, let's talk about friends and acquaintances. And Webster's defines friends as one attached to another by affection or esteem. That makes sense, right? Pretty clear. And an acquaintance it defines as a person whom you know, who one knows, but who is not a particularly close friend. Those are both good definitions, but I'm going to define them for today slightly differently, just for the sake of our discussion today, as a friend being a person who is in a position to influence you. Someone who is close enough to you that they have an influence on you. And an acquaintance as a person who is not in a position to influence you. You know, we have lots of people that we know, but we don't let them influence us. Now, why is this so important? No, because we're talking about that reciprocal relationship. Proverbs 1, starting in verse 10, tells us, go over there, Proverbs 1, starting in verse 10, my son, if sinners entice you, do not consent. So, right off the bat, if sinners try to get you to go with them, don't do it. And it goes on and says, if they say, come with us, let us lie in wait for blood, let us ambush the innocent without cause, let us swallow them alive like Sheol, even whole as those who go down to the pit. We will find all kinds of precious wealth, we will fill our houses with spoil. Throw in your lot with us, we shall have one purse. So this is describing some people who are wanting to literally go out and be highway robbers, right? And we may think, well, okay, I'm off the hook. I don't have people who come and say, let's go, beat people up and rob them. But do we ever have friends who try to influence us for sin? As we were talking about in Bob's Bible class this morning, do we have friends who say, hey, come over, have some wine, or we're going to have guys over, we're going to drink beer and watch the game. And, we want to hang out with our friends, and do we consent? Or we may have friends who say, it's not a big deal if you skim a little bit from the company. They make too much anyways. Come with me, we'll defraud the company. Or whatever it may be. There are people in our lives who try to influence us for evil. He says, verse 15 and 16, my son, do not walk in the way with them. Keep your feet from their path. For their feet run to evil, and they hasten to shed blood. They're going towards evil things. So don't let a person who tries to entice you to sin be in a position to influence you. They should not be allowed to be in your inner circle of friends. Now, to be honest, this is hard. Because maybe we've known these people for decades. Maybe they're our close family members. And every time we spend time with them, they're trying to entice us to sin. They're trying to influence us to do things that we know are wrong. But yet we feel obligated to spend time with them. Because, I've known them forever. Or because they're my family. Well, if they're trying to influence you towards evil, are they really worth having as a close relationship? Proverbs 12 talks about this and looks at it from a slightly different angle. Proverbs 12:26 which reads, "The righteous is a guide to his neighbor, but the way of the wicked leads them astray." So we just talked about the way of the wicked, how the way of the wicked leads people astray, to lead people away from God. But you notice the first part of that. The righteous is a guide to his neighbor. A guide towards righteousness. The righteous lead those around them toward God. So we need to seek out friends who influence you toward righteousness. And think about that. So you've got people in your life who are influencing you to do what is right and honorable and pure and godly. And as you spend time with them, you conform to their actions, right? That's one of the many reasons why the Lord's church is such an important entity. Because here we have a group of people who we can build close relationships with, who will influence us towards righteousness, and who we can influence towards righteousness. This is where the true friends should be. So we see from these two passages that we need to keep those who influence you towards sin in what I'm going to call the acquaintance zone. You all have probably heard of the friend zone. The friend zone is the idea that you want to have a romantic relationship with someone and they say, well, you're such a good friend. Meaning they don't want to have a romantic relationship with you, they put you in the friend zone. Well, I'm going to say we need to keep those who influence us towards sin in the acquaintance zone. Meaning that we're friendly with them, we're nice to them, we're kind to them. We still try to influence them for righteousness, still try to teach them the gospel, but we're not letting them into our inner circle of friends where they influence us. We keep them at arm's distance. Now, this is not a mean-spirited thing. This is not a shunning people thing. It is protecting your righteousness. And the goal is to influence them such that they become righteous, and then they're walking in the way of righteousness with us, and we can have that close friendship. But we need to make sure that we're not letting those who influence us towards sin be in our inner circle of friends. So we see why this is important, and we see that we need to separate those friends from acquaintances. Well, now then, though, let's talk about how a true friend acts. And while this seems like a somewhat obvious statement, well, of course we know how true friends act. The Bible has a lot to say about it, and a lot of it's not actually as obvious as we might think. Now, in this section, each of the principles we look at, we're going to be asking two questions. We're going to be asking, do you seek friends like this? And we're going to be asking, are you a friend like this? Because this discussion really can be looked at from those two different angles. Who do you let be your friend, and what kind of friend are you? Both are important. Now, there is an overriding principle here in Romans 13, the passage that Silas read earlier, Romans 13, 9 and 10, which says, "For this you shall not commit adultery, you shall not murder, you shall not steal, you shall not covet. And if there's any other commandment, it is summed up in this saying, you shall love your neighbor as yourself." So all the commandments we have can be summed up in that statement. Love your neighbor as yourself. Think about it. Why don't we murder? Well, it's not loving. Why don't we steal or slander or covet, etc., etc., etc.? Goes on, he says, love does no wrong to a neighbor. Therefore, love is the fulfillment of the law. So the overriding principle here is that we need to be loving. We as Christians, we need to be loving people, and we need to seek out close friends who are also loving. But it's all well and good to say, be loving. But that's incredibly vague. Incredibly vague. In fact, we spent an entire year, a number of years ago, studying what love actually is. So let's dig into what this means. Let's go to Ephesians 4. And we're going to come back to Ephesians 4 a little bit later. But right now we're just going to look at verse 25. Ephesians 4:25 says, "Therefore, laying aside falsehood, speak truth each one of you with his neighbor, for we are members of one another." Speak truth each one of you with his neighbor. Be truthful. We as Christians should be truth seekers. We should be people who speak the truth. Okay, easy statement, right? Speak the truth. I can do that. But there are times there are times when the truth hurts, isn't there? There's times where telling somebody the truth, is going to sting a little. Maybe a close friend is involved in sin, and you have to tell them, I love you, but that's wrong, and you need to change. Or sometimes a close friend or family member might be in an abusive situation, and we have to go to them and say, that's abuse, that's not healthy, you need to get out. And that stings. Or maybe somebody has to come to us, and they speak the truth to us, and it stings, because it means we have to change. Proverbs 27 verse 6 speaks to this. Proverbs 27:6 says, faithful are the wounds of a friend, but deceitful are the kisses of an enemy. What an interesting verse. Let's start with the enemy part. Deceitful are the kisses of an enemy. Think about that, getting a kiss from an enemy. That might make you think, well, maybe they're not my enemy, right? They're flattering me, they're doing something nice to me. Maybe I should listen to them. But an enemy, what they'll want to do, they'll deceive you to get an advantage over you so they can harm you, right? Playing the double agent. They're deceitful. But faithful are the wounds of a friend. Well, why would a friend wound you? Well, because sometimes the truth hurts. Sometimes it hurts to be told that we're doing something sinful. Sometimes it hurts to be told that a relationship is toxic. Sometimes it hurts to be told that we need to change. But a friend, a faithful friend, will tell you that truth, even when it hurts. See, a true friend tells us the truth even when it's painful. Now, of course, if they're mature, they're going to do so in a loving, kind, godly, generous, gracious way. But the truth of the matter is that a true friend will tell us the truth even when it's painful. And sometimes that's why people don't like the church. Sometimes people don't like Christians because they want an enemy who will tell them nice things, things that sound good, but not make them change. But when people who truly care about them, people who truly love them, come to them and say, this is a dangerous or sinful situation, they don't like that, and so they leave. So the question becomes, do you choose that type of friend? Do you choose the type of friends who will tell you the truth, the godly, biblical truth, even when they know it's going to sting a little? Or do you prefer enemies who give you kisses? Going along with this, are you that type of friend? Are you the type of friend who will tell someone the truth? Who will speak the truth to them in a loving, kind way, even when you know it's going to hurt a little? Because that's a true friend. Now, Proverbs 27 has a lot of verses that talk about friendship. So we're going to stay in Proverbs 27, and we're going to look at Proverbs 27, verse 9. Verse 9 says, oil and perfume make the heart glad, so a man's counsel is sweet to his friends. So oil and perfume, of course, us guys, we don't generally wear perfume. We wear cologne. That's much more manly. But when you're clean and you smell nice, you feel good, right? You're uplifted. You're happy. So a man's counsel is sweet to his friends. Why is that? Well, someone who is a true friend, when they give you counsel, that lifts you up because you have help going in the right direction. They are encouraging you on to righteousness. So a true friend gives counsel you can trust. Counsel that is righteous. Counsel that will lead you in the right way. And when you know that a true friend is giving you true counsel, even when it hurts a little bit, you're thankful because you know they're trying to help you reach righteousness. So, do you choose that type of friend? Do you choose the type of friend who will give you godly counsel? Who will give you godly advice? Or do you choose friends who Well, they don't. Sometimes it's pleasing to people to have friends who, quote unquote, don't tell me what to do. But a godly friend will give us counsel when it's needed. On top of that, are you that type of friend? Are you the type of friend who will give counsel that uplifts the spirit, counsel that encourages and edifies? Or are you a downer? Someone who's always negative and taking people down? Think about it. Continuing on to the next verse, Proverbs 27, verse 10, we read, "Do not forsake your own friend or your father's friend, and do not give your brother's house, or do not go to your brother's house in the day of your calamity. Better is a neighbor who is near than a brother far away." So, reading through this, the first time I read this, I had to go back and read it a couple times, because it sounds almost like doublespeak, right? Family is important. Blood family is a good thing. But better is a neighbor who is near than a brother who's far away. That part, okay, we can start to understand it, right? All of my blood family lives a long ways away, except for Keely's parents who now live with us. But my sister, my parents, my dad, they don't live close. So trying to go to them in a time of need, well, that wouldn't be helpful, right? But you all are close by. Better a neighbor who is near than a brother who's far away. So don't forsake your friends or your father's friends when they have times of need. Again, we have that reciprocal relationship. So a true friend is there for you in tough times. A true friend will stand by you. And it's sad to say, but oftentimes blood family doesn't. You know, we've probably all seen situations where there's a family feud, and close relatives refuse to lend aid. Well, don't forsake your friends. Why? Because a true friend is there for you in tough times. So, do you choose that type of friend? Do you choose the types of friends who will be there for you in times of need? Again, this is one of the many reasons I love the Lord's church. Because when we're on hard times and we're in the Lord's church, we have people who we know will step up and help, who will be there for us, supporting us in our times of need. Do you choose that type of friend? Do you surround yourself with people who will be there for you? Or do you surround yourself with fair weather friends? Friends who may not, quote unquote, tell you what to do, but also friends who aren't going to be there when the going gets tough. Secondly, as you expect, are you that type of friend? Are you the kind of friend who will be there when people need you? Who will sacrifice to help others? Or are you the type of friend who will wash your hands of somebody the first time that they have need? Something to think about. Now, the Proverbs have bucket loads of passages about friends. I went through and I started making a list, and it started filling up my page really quickly. There's no way we had enough time. So let's go back now to Ephesians 4, and look at those verses 25 through 32, which give us some really great statements about how we should treat people. We already read verse 25, so let's read verse 26, which reads, "Be angry, and yet do not sin. Do not let the sun go down on your anger, and do not give the devil an opportunity." We talked about this a little bit in Bob's class this morning. Be angry and do not sin. Don't let the sun go down on your anger, and do not give the devil an opportunity. This is talking about working through things quickly. This isn't exclusively, take 4 deep breaths and let the anger go. This is working it out. This is going to them and saying, let's work this problem out so we don't have this hanging over our heads anymore. So a true friend will work to resolve disagreements promptly. You ever had a friend that when there's a disagreement, they shut down and they don't want to talk about it? And you have this cloud of anger or resentment or trouble or misunderstanding hanging over your head. And it eats at you. It gnaws at you. Maybe it makes you angry inside. You become resentful. A true friend will get that solved quickly. It says before the sun goes down. And as Dan said this morning, it doesn't mean that when the sun's up you can be angry and when the sun's down you can't be angry. It's get it done quickly. Get it worked out and resolved quickly. So do you choose that type of friend, the type of friend who's willing to work things out promptly? Or do you surround yourself with people who ignore problems and let that cloud of resentment hang above their heads? Furthermore, are you that type of friend? Now this is where it gets hard. Man, this gets hard. It's all well and good to say, well, my friends need to be this way. But what about us? Do we work through our anger, our disagreements quickly? There are certain personality types that really, really want that are assertive personality types and say, yes, let's work it out now. But there are other personality types that are avoiders. They'd rather ignore a problem and not talk about it and just hope it goes away. Problem is, it doesn't go away. It never goes away. It builds and builds and builds. So are you the type of friend who's willing to work through problems, even when it's hard, even when it's uncomfortable, to make sure that relationship can stay healthy? He goes on, he says, he who steals must steal no longer, but rather he must labor, performing with his own hands what is good, so that he will have something to share with one who has need. There is a whole ton there. We could do an entire sermon on just that verse. But let's focus in on the idea of having something to share with the one who is in need. See, a true friend puts others' needs above personal desires. A true friend will see someone who's in need and say, you know what, yeah, I worked hard for my money. I earned this money, but I'm going to sacrifice to help you out. I'm going to make sure that I can be generous with those who are in need. Now that's hard, isn't it? We earned our money. We want to keep our money in our pockets. But when we have friends who are in need, do we put their needs above our desires? So again, our two questions. Do you choose that type of friend? Do you choose friends who are generous people? Letting them into your inner circle so that when you're in need, they can help. But then, are you that type of friend? Are you the type of friend who's willing to be generous? Who's willing to help others? Who will go out of your way to make sure others are cared for? And this is the beautiful reciprocal nature of the church. Because when we have a group of people who are generous, giving people, and one person comes on a hard time, everyone takes care of them. And then when you come on hard times, as you have given to others in their time of need, so you are also taken care of in your time of need. We have this support network, the church, that can help in those times of difficulty. The passage goes on, though. It doesn't stop there. Let no unwholesome word proceed from your mouth, but only such a word as is good for edification according to the need of the moment, so that it will give grace to those who hear. Breaking this down bit by bit, of course, letting no unwholesome word proceed from your mouth, nothing that is harmful or cutting, nothing that is profane or sinful, but only words that are good for edification, as building up according to the need of the moment. Different moments need different type of speech. There are situations when a stiff rebuke is appropriate. But there are other times that a kind word is appropriate. And it even breaks down to different people. I've used this analogy before, but it's so apt. Say you have someone who's a soldier, who's been a soldier for a long time. You might be able to go up to them and give them a stiff rebuke directly, and they may accept it and say, thank you. But then if you have a young woman who's been abused, if you give her the same stiff rebuke you gave that soldier, she's going to be devastated and crushed. You need to approach her in gentleness and kindness without that severity. But then if you went to the soldier with that kind of answer, he'd be like, what are you going on about? The different moments have different needs. And then he says, so that it will give grace to those who hear. What is grace? Grace is unearned favor. So we're giving unearned favor to those who hear our words. They may not deserve kind words. They may not deserve edification. But that's okay, because we don't either. We give it to them anyway. See, a true friend considers the needs of the moment. And I have to say, this has been a difficult learning point for me. Because different personalities also need different approaches. And me as an extrovert, I want people to come to me and talk to me and look at me and lots of noise. Well, I'm learning introverts don't like that. And I come to them with, hey, I'm excited that you exist. And they go, ah! And they get intimidated. And so I have to apologize. Any of you who are introverts who I have done that to and I've intimidated you, I'm sorry. Please forgive me. I'm trying to be better. So that brings us to our questions. Do you choose that type of friend? Do you choose the type of friend who considers the needs of the moment? Who wants to pay enough attention to what's going on that they're sensitive to your needs? Do you seek out friends who are paying attention? And are you that type of friend? Are you the type of friend who considers the need of the moment? Considers what someone's going through? Considers who they are and the best way to approach them, so that at the moment you can give grace to those who hear your words? This isn't easy. And I'm not expecting any of us to be able to do this like right off the bat. It's a learning process. But we can go through this together. Next verse says, do not grieve the Holy Spirit of God, by whom you were sealed for the day of redemption. Don't do things that cause him pain. What things cause him pain? Let all bitterness and wrath and anger and clamor and slander be put away from you, along with all malice. You look at all of those, bitterness, wrath, anger, clamor, slander, malice. All of those damage people in some way. You know, when you are bitter with somebody, it damages them. When you're wrathful or angry or you slander someone, that causes damage. When you have malice towards someone, that causes damage. So a true friend avoids causing damage, avoids doing things that will harm others. Now, what's the difference between a friend telling you the truth and it causes you pain versus someone causing you damage? Well, it's very similar to the difference between a doctor removing a rotten tooth and someone hitting you in the face with a baseball bat. Both may remove a tooth, but it's for completely different reasons. A true friend avoids causing damage. So, do you choose that type of friend? Do you choose the type of friend who avoids causing damage? Who doesn't slander or abuse you with their words? Someone who isn't bitter or angry all the time? Do you choose the kind of friend who avoids causing damage? Or do you, for some reason, surround yourself with toxic people? People who damage you and hurt you repeatedly. Furthermore, are you that type of friend? Are you the kind of friend who avoids causing damage? Do you do everything you can to make sure you're not harming people? Because if we are toxic people in the church, then the church becomes toxic. And that's not godly. One more verse that I want us to cover today. Be kind to one another, tender-hearted, forgiving each other, just as God in Christ has also forgiven you. Kind, tender-hearted, forgiving. But he sums it all up in this statement, just as God in Christ also has forgiven you. That's our motivation for all of this. See, a true friend imitates Christ. A true friend forgives. Why? Because Christ first forgave us. A true friend is kind. Why? Because Christ was kind. A true friend is tender-hearted. Why? Because Christ forgave us. A true friend imitates Christ. Now we ask the question, we've asked this a dozen times already. Do you choose that type of friend? But where do we find that kind of friend? In the church, right? The world isn't going to be imitating Christ. The world is not going to be doing things that are Christ-like. So, what does that tell us about who our closest friends should be? Should be Christians. Should be Christians. And are you that type of friend? Do you imitate Christ? Now, someone may say, but David, if our closest friends are Christians, then how are we going to do outreach? How are we going to reach the lost? Well, we talked about that when we talked about separating our friends from acquaintances. We don't let those who are going to influence us to sin to have that close, intimate relationship with us, but we keep them in a situation where we can influence them, but they're not influencing us. We keep them as acquaintances. Yes, we're friendly with them, we're kind to them, we reach out to them, and we strive to bring them into that situation where they are in the church and they can be our closest friends. But if we're intentionally surrounding ourselves all the time exclusively with sinful people, where are we going to end up heading? Away from Christ. So, today, as we've been talking about friends and acquaintances, asking who is influencing whom, we've seen why this is a big deal. It's a big deal because those that we spend lots of time with influence our morals, influence our direction. We've talked about separating the friends from the acquaintances, how we need to strive to influence others for godliness while not letting them influence us for sin. Thus, our closest friends should be those who are influencing us towards righteousness, and we should keep those who influence us to sin at arm's length so they don't influence us. And we've talked about what a true friend is. And we've gone through a whole long list of what the Bible says a true friend acts like. Now, there are definitely more passages we could go through. But for today, I want each of us to consider who you spend most of your time with. And think about it. Who do you legitimately spend most of your time with? Now, of course, coworkers, you spend a lot of time with coworkers, and you don't really get a choice of that. But the people you can choose to be around, are they the kind of people who influence you for good or for evil? I can't answer for you. Let's adjust our time that we spend with them accordingly. If we're spending lots and lots and lots and lots and lots of time with people who are influencing us to sin, we need to reassess that. We need to spend time with people who are going to influence us towards righteousness. And I'll add something onto this. If our reason for not wanting to spend time with Christians, or more time with Christians, is because Christians are boring and don't do the quote-unquote fun, sinful things, then we really need to adjust our motives. Let's address who we spend time with. And let our time with those who are outside, those who are influencing us towards sin, to be focused on evangelism, focused on getting them into Christ, and not allowing them to have a negative influence on us. Now today, if you are with us as we're going into our time of the invitation, and you have a need, we're all familiar with the invitation. Maybe you've got some sin that you need to get out of your life. Maybe you're feeling lonely, and you need the support of the congregation who does love you. We're here for you. And if maybe you're ready to become a Christian, maybe you're watching online and you want to learn more about becoming a Christian. If you're watching online, get in contact with us. Email, Facebook, Messenger, phone call, any of that. And if you're with us today and you want to learn more about becoming a Christian, or you're ready to become a Christian, please let your need be known, whatever it may be, as Bob leads us in this invitation song.